Welcome to the Flow State Podcast, where we're all about finding balance. We're your hosts, Monica Grohne
and Norah Candito. Now let's get into the flow. Welcome back, Flow State listeners. This week we are diving into questions that you have been asking us. So this episode is for you. I mean, they're all for you. But today we are going to dive right in, and I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, so many good questions. Thanks for asking. And as always, please keep the questions coming. Every season, we will try to do one of these community Q&A episodes and just kind of get your questions answered.
Yes, this has been an amazing season. I would love to hear feedback from people if you enjoyed the guest speakers, if there are any topics that you guys are hoping to hear from, as this is our last episode of the season.
Yeah, Nora, what was your favorite episode this season?
Ooh, that's a good question. I really loved talking about the endocrine disruptors with Jenna. I think we opened it up with that, and there's a lot of insight, and I even learned some things, hoping to actually use their technology in talking about like preconception health and fertility markers. So I'm really excited about that. And then I know the cycle syncing episode, a lot of people were raving about. How about you?
Yeah, I'd probably say the gut episode was really good. I've actually listened to it a few times, and have recommended it like countless times. So love that episode. And I mean, the Stacey Sims episode, but everyone probably already knew that about me. I was so excited for that recording, and listening back to it. And Nora and I have had this conversation, but it's definitely very sciencey. So if you're listening and you're like, I liked the episode, but I didn't know half the words in it, we hear you. And we're definitely trying to bring it down to earth for you as much as we can. But it's, for me, just an overwhelming excitement for being open and like seeing the research that is getting done on women. And that gives me so much like hope and excitement, and I just think we're moving in the right direction and finally starting to understand some of the science, male versus female. That gets me really excited.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. I think, I know people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm sending this episode to my mom, to my grandma. Like, every person needs to hear this information. And yeah, let's just keep protein trending.
Yeah. Protein and like working out and love it. All of it. So good.
I think that's a good kind of segue into, because I know a couple of the questions were more protein focused. So I'd love for you to kind of go into that. And one of the questions we got was, can you have too much protein in a serving? So debunk that one for us.
Yeah. Okay. Love this question. And when I did my 30 days of 30 grams of protein meals on Instagram, got this one a lot. And I even think, there's just a lot of misconception around this. We go into this pretty deep in episode 7 with Stacey Sims, but the misconception comes from a recommendation for men where post-workout they should get 20 grams of protein for muscle protein synthesis. So muscle protein synthesis being this process of like our muscles actually breaking down and building, which we need to create skeletal muscle or muscle. And men need less because they need less of the amino acid leucine, which that's kind of like the key one that's really activating the muscle protein synthesis. We need all of the essentials, so we need a complete protein. But women actually need a higher dosage. So they need 30 grams in their reproductive years, and actually in postmenopausal, menopausal years, closer to 40 grams. Because of that leucine need for the muscle protein synthesis. So that's kind of where that number comes from, of people thinking like you can only absorb 20 or 25 grams of protein at once. But even beyond that, if you're getting more than 30 to 40 grams, depending on your life cycle stage, the leftover protein is still going to be used. So amino acids are used in so many bodily systems, like neurotransmission, immune system, in our gut, like all of these areas use amino acids. So if it's not going to our muscles, it's going to be used somewhere else. And it's, yeah, still available for us to utilize. So it's not wasteful.
Yeah, and you're most likely not gaining weight because you're eating too much protein. It's just that's not, our body is not preferring it in that way. We don't have the same level of storage for protein as we do for carbohydrates and for fats. So it's likely not the reason.
Yeah. Um, and it takes more energy to break down protein too. So like if you're, I don't know, you're not going to gain weight from eating too much protein. I mean, granted, if you are like trying to bulk, yeah, what you do is you eat more. But just because you eat a meal that has 45 grams of protein in it, it doesn't mean that it's like a waste.
Yeah, agreed. It's so interesting, the people that I've started to share more of this information on, they're like, that is so much protein in one sitting. Like, I can't eat that much, or I can't. And, it's just because that is what we've been accustomed to, but it's so not true. And for anyone that hasn't checked out Monica's videos, check out all of the recipe inspiration, because you will be surprised how easy it is just making some swaps or adding a few things in, like adding some nuts and seeds into a meal as a topper, or the cottage cheese to your eggs, little things where you don't have to eat this ginormous volume in order to get that level of protein. I think we just need to help people rewrite this story, unlearn what has been ingrained in people's minds. And once you start practicing it and seeing how it feels in your body and the body changes you might experience in a positive way, I think that will be, proof enough.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, eating more protein, it was like just a satiation factor in actually being able to stay full for 3 or 4 hours. Not full, but like not feel like I need to go and grab a snack every 2 hours was huge. So, talk about blood sugar balance. Like, I think eating more protein for me has been essential to that journey as well.
Totally. Yeah, most people I hear, they think their cravings are significantly reduced, like they're not craving sugar as much, and it's because you're likely getting enough energy and you're getting those protein needs, which is going to help again with that satiation or like meal satisfaction, and stretch the length of how long that meal lasts you for, which is awesome.
I think people also don't realize how much protein can actually, I mean, it's when you compare like chicken to a vegetable, it's not the same, but there is protein to be found in vegetables too. And so I think people just forget that when they think protein, they're like, yeah, chicken, meat, like eggs, but, peas have a lot of protein, hence pea protein. And even, you look at a bell pepper, like there's protein in there.
Yeah, totally. Oh, love this conversation. Okay, another big one when it came to more of the muscle side of things, and I know this was a very popular Instagram post that you made, but the difference between collagen and other proteins.
Yeah. So I think collagen has become this really popular supplement, right? And we see it most commonly for hair, skin, and nails, which makes a lot of sense, and joint health. And so I think when we talk about getting enough protein, we're talking about getting enough complete protein. And a collagen supplement can be great because it is really valuable for our cartilage, for our skin, tendons, and ligaments, all of those things. But we have to be thinking about, why am I taking this? Am I taking a collagen supplement to help meet my protein goals, or am I taking it for those joint benefits? Or is what I'm looking for a complete protein source like a whey or pea isolate? So the difference being, collagen doesn't have a complete essential amino acid profile. Complete proteins are like wheys or pea proteins, and the makeup of a collagen protein is actually directly benefiting, like I said, our cartilage, our tendons, and our ligaments. You can go really deep into collagen. There are actually like multiple different types, and some types are better for your skin versus other types being better for your cartilage. But I think like the main kind of theme here is if you're looking to hit your protein goals for muscle and muscle support, you're really looking for a complete protein, and collagen is not that. If you're taking a collagen supplement, it should be because you want the joint skin support. So that's like really the basic, like main difference. And yeah, then people kind of ask, and Nora, I'd even be curious about your opinion of like, should I count collagen towards my like daily protein goals? My kind of thought process is like, if you're combining it with other things that make it complete, then sure, that's probably great. But I think if you're like post-workout and trying to get a protein hit, like collagen's not the way.
Not the way?
I know, I was trying to hold back my laugh about that.
Had to. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think, for somebody who, like yourself, 6 months ago, where you were previously eating around 50 grams of protein, like any improvement from that is going to be amazing. So if that's kind of easing into things with something like a collagen or maybe another whey protein or pea protein, whatever fits your dietary needs. By the way, most whey proteins are either lactose free or really low in lactose. I get that question all the time. Is like, oh, I have an intolerance to dairy. I have not had many people experience any reaction to incorporating whey, even though it's coming from a dairy source. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Especially in isolate, because an isolate usually goes through that process of like removing the...
Exactly. Yeah, it's being kind of stripped down. But yeah, I think any improvement, we can maybe talk about like the different levels. So if you're already doing all of the things and this is the next level for you, it feels really doable, choosing different sources of protein to hit that recommended goal for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, if you're just like, oh, I'm looking for a protein supplement to boost my protein needs, like I'd probably reach for a pea isolate or a whey isolate versus a collagen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. I know there were a ton of hormone questions too, and I've had a few people reaching out. Just, we did a really deep dive into birth control specifically. I've had people ask me about like the Duva ring and the arm implant and the depot shots and the IUDs, and there are so many different types. And if you have a lot of questions about how things work and how it's impacting your body, I encourage you to have that conversation with your provider. Like, this space is purely informational and as an education purpose. We are not your providers. It's just a good reminder and caveat here. And a lot of these things can be really individualized. So somebody asked, like, what does a hormonal IUD change about periods? I'm really curious, even hearing, like, do you have an IUD? I know personally, when I started birth control at 14 years old, I wasn't looking into what was in the pill or how it was impacting my body or the side effects, which is wild to think about the number of things we might be putting in or on our bodies that we don't even know what they are. So if this is you, I encourage you to even just like read the fine print that comes with your supplement or with your birth control or your IUD. And just like, I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's interesting too. Even you just saying like the pamphlet that comes with it. A lot of times when you get an IUD and like, you don't get handed the stuff. And so ask your doctor for it. Like, hey, does this come with like all of the warnings and the pamphlet? Like, I would like to see it.
I mean, that's all public information too. If you just Google, like, they legally have to report that stuff. But most IUDs are progesterone based. It's still a synthetic type of progesterone. They're actually like weak steroids, which is really interesting to think about. And the way that the IUDs mostly, I'm generalizing here, mostly work in terms of the hormonal ones is that they thicken the cervical mucus. So we've talked too about like what your fertile mucus looks like on here versus non-fertile mucus. So it thickens it so that the sperm motility is not going to work as well. They're not going to be able to, quote, swim as well in that thickened cervical mucus. So that's the first way that it works in preventing pregnancy. It also builds up the uterine lining and makes it kind of like an inhospitable environment for a fertilized egg. And then most of them, like the Mirena specifically, which I know is a very common one to be used, it's preventing ovulation up to 85% in the first year, but then the years after that, it's only about 15%. So in a beautiful way, it does actually let you experience a lot of the cycle where you are ovulating, you're having that like natural change in hormones throughout the month, and you might have a significantly less bleed. So it actually reduces your bleed by about 90%. That's why some people don't even get a cycle anymore. They might not bleed. Downsides to this one though, they used to think it was more centralized, that like the hormones were only being spit out into your uterus, but that's not the case. They've found it in like breast tissue and other spaces throughout your body. So, you know, I still think it's the best choice actually in terms of any type of hormonal birth control. I would choose the Mirena IUD, but there are still other options that you can still.
Yeah, I had a Marea IUD for, I mean,
I did too.
I had two, so over 10 years or 10 years. And I believe I was still ovulating because I still had like temperature shifts, like kind of could still experience the cycle. So I think that that is interesting. I didn't really bleed, but I could still tell that I was cycling.
Yeah. So that is nice. This one does have a higher link to depression. So I think that that's a really interesting note and something that I don't think is always talked about when we go on any sort of hormonal birth control, is that it can have mood changes. So something to be mindful of. And they last a while, right? Like around 5 years.
I think they've even increased that now.
They have increased it, yeah. So they're, again, different types. I think Mirena now is good for 7, I believe.
Okay, that leads us into someone asked about the copper IUD. I'm actually interested to hear about this. I don't know much about the copper one, but specifically around like the copper IUD causing a lot of cramping for them.
Yeah, so again, like I would want to double check with your provider, just have them check out the location, making sure that it's still implanted correctly, it hasn't moved, or your body hasn't like rejected it and it's trying to get it out. Because pain is one of the most common symptoms that you can have if your body is trying to reject or get rid of the IUD. When you think about it, it is a foreign object that is hanging out inside of you. So it's not uncommon for that to occur. And that is the way that they can be faulty, or how you can still get pregnant, is if they're not in the correct position. So the way that the copper IUD works, this is the non-hormonal IUD, which is great. But downsides from this is that it typically causes a much heavier flow for individuals, about 20 to 50% increase in flow, which is significant. And I think that's where it could come to some of the cramping, if it's just your lining is thicker and now there's a physical object. I think that could be a high cause of it. I know this individual mentioned like really doubling down on their supplementation, using Marea, using food to be more anti-inflammatory and not having to rely on things like ibuprofen. But that is, again, I would want to make sure that it's in the correct position. Not being rejected by your body. And yes, definitely continuing. As we've talked about here before, it can sometimes take longer than one cycle for you to feel those changes. So stick with it for 3 months before you really come to a conclusion on maybe the diet or supplementation is not working. That would be my advice. I thought this was really interesting when I was looking into it a little bit more, is that it has the highest rate of user satisfaction, which even though it has a higher bleed, and you can leave this one in for 10 years, which is really awesome.
That's interesting because I feel like I hear most often that people have the Merino one.
I do too. I do think it is still the most common, and I'm not sure in terms of why. Just like how long they've been around for, or I'm not sure, honestly. But yeah, really interesting. Again, I would double check with your provider, making sure that it's okay. But I do think it is possible to have the copper IUD and not experience extreme cramping. Like to me, that could just be more inflammation based and yeah, keeping those things, like you said, doubling down on supplementation and diet.
Okay, next question about IUDs. And I think we touched on this a little bit in our Is It Normal episode, but an IUD making someone super dry.
Totally. Yeah, so I mean, it can alter your testosterone. It can also alter your cervical mucus production. So if you are not having the same level or your natural lubrication, that can be due to the change in hormones. So that, to me, that's pretty much the end of it. It's definitely common, especially with any type of birth control, especially the oral contraceptives, very, very common to be dry. But I do know that also with the hormonal IUDs, some people are reporting like lower libido, and that can also be caused in having lower cervical mucus as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, especially too, I mean, if you're not ovulating, you're probably not producing that same cervical mucus around that time too.
Right, and the whole way that this one works is by thickening the cervical mucus. So it might just be like how your body is responding to the specific hormones. And I mean, when I went on it, within a month I broke out in acne for the first time. That's like how my whole story began. And then I ended up having some ovarian cysts rupture, and I got it removed within like 6 or 7 months of having it, which is pretty unfortunate. But I think that was my unique experience. So it just goes to show like every person can have a very different story with the same device or the same thing.
Sometimes it's so hard to answer questions because we're like, it's all individual.
Well, I also have like 50 million follow-up questions when someone's like, I have headaches. And I'm like, when do they happen?
Okay.
Yeah. Did you also see Jolene Brighton is releasing a book in April called Is This Normal?
No.
I thought it was so funny. Like I just saw it last week after we had recorded, and I was like, we are right on the money here.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. Yeah, somebody asked about not testing positive on an ovulation test. I think we talked about this a little bit before as well. So there's different ways to monitor ovulation. Most commonly, like those ovulation predictor kits, or OPKs, if you've seen that term thrown around, or like the LHP strips that a lot of people use when they are trying to conceive. So the challenge with that is really the timing, in that it is more of a one moment in time. Like ovulation is an event. So you do have LH beginning to increase right before the release of the egg. So if those, again, like ovulation tests, I'm not sure which ones you're using or what that means to you. It is possible, though, to cycle without having ovulation. And we've talked, too, about the connection between stress and that impacting ovulation. We talked about melatonin and its connection to ovulation. So a lot of things, just want to be making sure that we're supporting getting enough food, getting enough rest, managing stress, the health side of things that will impact your body feeling safe enough to even ovulate. And then timing, like we've talked too about the differences in timing of ovulation. So for me, like it's much later in my cycle because I have a longer cycle than somebody that might have a shorter cycle. So if you're not using them throughout the whole month, or, I think just exploring that. I personally like the basal body temperature tracking for this reason, because you can't really fight like either your temperature spikes or it doesn't. And it is just a numerical thing instead of, I don't know, I just find for individuals that I work with that it's like less emotional seeing a temperature than it is these like non-blinking lights on a test that's like, oh, you're not fertile. It's like, thanks, asshole. Like,
Yeah. I think from a trying to conceive standpoint too, it's like if you are using a basal body temperature and you know when your temperature spikes, or like, on average what day it is, because your temperature spikes after ovulation. But that can at least give you a time frame of when you should use LH strips to try to determine when you're ovulating, because your LH will start to rise before you ovulate. So then you can kind of narrow down the window. And using both as well will help you determine, like, am I actually ovulating?
Exactly. Perfect summary.
Okay, someone asked, they have a 1 to 2 day period and they would like to lengthen it.
Yeah, interesting hearing that too. In that Is This Normal episode, we talked a little bit about how long cycles, or bleeds, excuse me, should be. We also talked about cycle length, but in terms of bleed length, it can be normal for somebody to have a 2-day bleed. Like, that might be just what your body does. So my question is, why are you trying to lengthen it? Like, if it's always been this way and everything else is working for you, I wouldn't use that as like the only marker cause for concern. Of course, more follow-up questions, but that's my thought.
Yeah, I guess if someone does have a 1 day cycle or a short cycle, like, are there any kind of tips that you would give for trying to increase it in length?
Yeah. So things that I just talked about too, with like making sure we're adequately nourished, we're not under eating or over exercising, the stress factor, because if you're not ovulating, or, if your body's not really building up that lining appropriately, then that might be cause for why you have a shorter bleed. Other things I typically check with that too might be thyroid status and also vitamin D status. So those are a few things for me when, like, if you used to have 7-day cycles or 5-day cycles and now you have a 1-day cycle, or you're really just spotting more than anything else, that's a change. That's where I would be more concerned, as if this is a dramatic switch for you.
And can that be a sign that you're, like, going towards amenorrhea, where you're, like, losing your cycle? Like, can it be like over time?
Hypothalamic amenorrhea. Yeah, it can be that.
Yeah.
It could be PCOS, where, some people don't get a cycle for months or even a year. So there are so many different causes. I would definitely say, again, if this is like a dramatic change, or if you're trying to conceive and things aren't clicking, definitely reach out to a provider. I'm happy to chat. But this is one where, like, that is very individual to you.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
I love this, like, using the next question, Marea, for perimenopause. Absolutely. Like, I think even if a male were to take this supplement, they're still going to feel benefits. Honestly, like, the magnesium alone and just the adequate levels of the nutrients that our bodies need, you're still going to have benefits. Even if you're not getting a consistent cycle anymore, those nutrients are still going to be really supportive of wherever you are in your hormone health, even if that is phasing out of getting a cycle. I'd love to hear how you answer that question too, Monica.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's just, we have customers in perimenopause taking it and noticing benefits. Especially, I just talked to someone who takes it, and they said it really helps their night sweats. And they notice if they don't take it, then they're worse. So I think we've just seen from experience, how these nutrients are supporting people in that stage.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, again, it's just like supportive no matter what.
Okay, the last question that we got was around caffeine and hormones. So, Norah, do you maybe want to just quickly, and they also asked about, like, using caffeine as a pre-workout. So maybe first, you want to just briefly summarize, and we have a whole episode on caffeine and hormones, but kind of the connection between caffeine and hormones and how they can affect one another.
Yeah, and I think what I see most commonly is people wake up, the first thing they do when they get out of bed is have a cup of coffee. They feel like they need it to function. They need it to go to the bathroom. They need it to wake up. And when I hear that, that's, to me, is an unhealthy relationship with, you're reliant on a stimulant like caffeine in order to function. So how that can impact our hormones is big time. Like if you're waking up and that's the first thing to hit your system, like you haven't had anything to drink for however many hours at the minimum you've been sleeping, you need to have some water first. Like hydrate your cells, help you to wake up naturally. And then from a stress standpoint, like that caffeine hitting your system first thing in the morning, we have our own kind of natural caffeine, and that's cortisol. And that is at its peak in the morning hours. So capitalizing on that first and then timing our caffeine like mid-morning when that is starting to trail off is actually the best thing that we can do for our hormones and just overall even supporting for circadian rhythm, which we have a whole episode on circadian rhythm, sleep, and hormones as well in this season. Definitely listen to that as well with the caffeine episode. But those are some really big things where it can impact your stress response, make you feel overstressed. But that caffeine is also then going to signal to your body of, oh, I don't need you natural caffeine, cortisol, and it might downregulate that. So playing around, seeing how that works for you, it might change your sleep, could change your cravings. You know, a lot of the things that we talked about in the blood sugar episode as well would pertain to that too.
Yeah. And then when it comes to caffeine as pre-workout, I have a lot of thoughts, especially, so, I mean, I've talked about, I guess maybe just on my Instagram, I don't know if we've talked about it here. I guess we talked about it with Stacey Sims, but like fed training, like wanting to eat before you train is really great. So if you're eating before you train and you have coffee too, like, yeah, like kind of what Norah just said, I think it's great to have something in your stomach before you have your coffee. Am I someone who sometimes doesn't do that? Totally. Yes, it happens. But caffeine is a great stimulant to also support our workouts. And if you notice that it does help improve your performance, like, I don't know, I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with it because it can increase power output. It can improve endurance. It can kind of help you get past that, like on the verge of failure in your workouts. So if it's something that you enjoy before working out and you're also eating before, like, I think that's great. And you'll see a lot of caffeine in pre-workout supplements. I have a lot of thoughts on pre-workout supplements too. I'd probably rather have a cup of coffee than drink something that I've never found the ingredients in pre-workouts to be the best, I guess is what I'll say. The quality is not always the best. Like I'd rather just have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But in terms of caffeine and hormones and using caffeine as a pre-workout, like I'd just say also eat something as well.
Yeah. No, I definitely I don't want to sound like I'm demonizing caffeine. I think when I talk about things, and especially because of the population that I'm working with, is usually coming to me with hormone issues or they need support around things. So for me, that's a pretty easy one that we can manipulate. And I'd even be curious to hear your thoughts because I know you've changed your habits around caffeine consumption, as have I. Whereas at one point, I didn't really notice caffeine having an impact on my energy. I just really enjoy the taste of coffee. And then for an event at Penn State where we stayed up for 46 hours in their dance marathon, and I went completely off caffeine. And then after that, I was so sensitive to it. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize how this was making me feel. And then even now, sometimes it makes me feel more anxious. So each individual has a different kind of tolerance to caffeine. We all break it down or metabolize it differently. But what I hear most often from people when they go off of caffeine or take a break is that it just makes them acknowledge like how much tolerance they may have built up and how much they were relying on it, and knowing that you can, I give people a recommendation of about 3 months to see those changes where you might need to give your body some time to kind of rebuild and heal on its own to get that natural energy back. And that has a lot to do with adrenal health, which is the cortisol stuff that I'm talking about. But what about you?
Yeah, I have a very similar experience of like stopped drinking coffee after going on a sailing passage where it was making me sick because it can make you feel more seasick. And then didn't drink it for like 6 months. And I was like, oh, I'm not as anxious as I thought I was. I was just drinking a lot of coffee. And started drinking it again. I like the taste of coffee, and I like getting a coffee while I'm out. You know, it feels like a treat. It's kind of fun sometimes. But I'd say even in the last few months, kind of started drinking more than I had been again, and noticed higher anxiety. It never really affects my sleep. I'm a great sleeper, but could tell the difference. And so now I'm backing off again. And now I'm like, oh, I've been really like wired and tired. So it does definitely have an effect. And I think you just have to learn what that is for you. And it's one of those things like, I don't know, enjoy the coffee, but there's things you can do to make it not so anxious.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
All right. Great questions, everyone. Thank you for submitting. And again, if you have more questions, you know how to reach out to both Norah and I. There are links to our social media down below in the show notes. Thank you so much for another amazing season. Huge thank you, Norah, to you for being on this journey with me. It's so fun to share with you all, and we just love doing this show. So thanks so much for tuning in.
I could not agree more, and thank you for making it all possible too. It's been a really beautiful thing to co-create together, and I'm really, really proud of it. Like being able to spread this mission that we have to so many people like you guys, like, it makes me feel so fulfilled, and I feel so grateful that we even get to do this. So thanks for your support, and please share.
Yeah. Some of the notes we get too, I shared last week. I was like crying in my car because someone sent the most beautiful message just saying how much they appreciate it and how it's helping them to share with their 14-year-old daughter. And that's why we do this, truly, is to be able to spread this information further. So if you have feedback or comments or just want to make our day, definitely leave a review or send us a note. And we're excited for another season coming this summer.
Yay!
All right, guys, we will see you in season 3. Until then, come and say hi on social.
Bye.